Welcome to the B2B Category Creators Podcast, hosted by Gil Alouche, founder and CEO of Metadata.io. This podcast is all about sharing the real and sometimes edgy secrets of B2B software creation. On today's episode, we have Dan O'Connell, CSO and CRO at Dialpad, and Keith Messick, SVP of Marketing at LaunchDarkly.
Thank you, Dan and Keith, for joining. This is the Category Creator Podcast. My name is Gil Alouche. I'm the founder and CEO of Metadata. I have these two gentlemen with me, Dialpad and LaunchDarkly. Dan, maybe you can get us started and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Gil, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And then I'm our Chief Revenue Officer here at Dialpad, and then also a member of the board. Dialpad acquired the business that I was managing and building coming up on 3 years. So it's a startup called TalkIQ. It's a speech recognition NLP startup. And then prior to being the CEO of that business, I had spent about a decade at Google building out sales organizations and teams. I joined Google when it was a couple hundred people, left when it was 60,000 people later. So a little bit of a crazy experience to go through. And then went with my boss to build another ad tech company called AdRoll, which is now known as NextRoll. So it's great to be here.
Very cool. Very familiar with AdRoll. Great company. Keith.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Keith Messick. I run marketing here at LaunchDarkly. I've been here a little over a year. For the past decade plus, I've run marketing at many different companies of all stages, one of which was Dialpad, where I worked with Dan. And it was such a terrible experience that I had to leave because working with Dan is absolute hell.
Very difficult.
It's very difficult. So he's going to ruin this podcast any moment now.
I cannot wait. It looks like this is going to be interesting. So this is great. I know Meredith, by the way. She was a few cohorts before me in Alchemist Accelerator. So I got the chance to know her, and then she's fucking awesome. She's ruthless. So that's cool for you to work for that kind of CEO. Gentlemen, it's nice to meet and have you on this podcast. This is the first time I'm using a proper glass for the drink. Usually it's a cup and everyone gives me shit for it, so don't worry about it.
I gotta pour mine.
Definitely. So, take a minute, do that.
Good I didn't even reply to that email. I just have a LaCroix.
No. Oh, okay. LaCroix, right. But there's no alcohol in LaCroix, so that's not gonna work.
I apologize. If I get drunk, I'll be mean to Dan and it'll fall apart.
We'll I think we can handle it. You sure you don't want to grab a glass of wine or a whiskey or something of your choice?
I'm good. I appreciate it.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Well, let's get started. Usually we talk about category creators and category creation, but also about just general other topics that are interesting. Let's start there. Both LaunchDarkly and Dialpad are very unique companies. Keith, maybe we can start with you. What do you think about category creation? Many founders are being pulled to do category creation because VCs tell them that that's the best way to get to $1 billion. And some think it's a good idea, some think it's a shitty idea, but anyway, they do it and try to do it. What's your opinion about it? Well,
if VCs say it, it must be right? It must be right like 10% of the time, whatever the average is. But when it's right, it's really right, maybe 40%. So I think that category creation is great when you have a category to create. I think it is really distracting when you don't. And I've seen it both ways. And I think B2B category creation is actually its own animal. A lot of times when people talk about category creation, they talk about Uber. And I'm like, there's one of those, but like that may or may not apply to your insert, MarTech, business communications, DevOps company, whatever it is, right? But when you have the opportunity, the genuine opportunity, it's really valuable. I think where most people do it wrong, and I've participated in this once, is where you just try and create a category for category's sake, but like the people aren't really asking for it. It's just, you're just trying to sell the same product that someone else is, and you're just trying to call it a different thing. And that's when I think it's just a huge distraction. But when you have an opportunity to focus on the people in your audience and give them something unique, I will stand with the VCs on that one.
Okay, 1 out of 10, the VC is right, and when they are right, you should create a category. I'll ask you more about what signals that tell you that you should or should not. Dan, what's your opinion about category creation?
Yeah, I would generally, Keith and I usually don't agree a lot, but I agree with him on this. What's interesting on category creation is a lot of it gets into marketing speak and I think especially when you see businesses that see their opportunities to create a category, you then suddenly see, I would say, startups battle over the branding of that category. I think conversational intelligence, whether you call that coaching, however you want to frame that, voice intelligence, whatever it might be, you see all of these startups suddenly kind of vet into how do they brand it and see it. And I actually think that becomes distracting and difficult for the market to actually understand what is the problem that people are solving. Like everyone gets so caught up in the owning kind of the marketing term and marketing speak behind it that similar to what Keith said, I think it becomes distracting, but I also think it gets really hard for the market to actually understand. But I do agree that there are moments in time where there are new technologies that allow you to truly create new products that people haven't seen before. And I think if you can be the dominant player, because much like many of these markets, few markets are winner take all. You typically see kind of 2 to 3 companies kind of float to the top on it. If you can be one of those companies, I think there's extreme value creation created for everybody, whether it's the people building the startup to the investors to whoever it might be.
First of all, cheers for both of you agreeing on one subject. That's great. That's a good start, right? So cheers. Thank you. Happy Friday. You both agree that sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it's a terrible one, very distracting, it's confusing for customers, for the market. George Chernoff told me 2-3 weeks ago, look, if you are, I have a binary question, George Chernoff from Pendo. I was like, look, I ask myself this question, it's a binary question. Am I taking a new line item in the budget or is it an existing one? What for you are the questions or the ways that whether you're going to tell to your CMO or CEO or yourself, yeah, I'm going to go and fight this battle because we are completely unique and innovative and define a new category, or not. We're just the better version of something that is already in existence.
Yeah, well, I think some of it comes down to like features. So, to talk a little bit about, just to give an example of Dialpad. So we do voice, like we're a communications and collaboration platform is our core. Now, our approach and narrative is very much leaning into how do we help people understand what's happening in these conversations. So to us, like when we think about category creation, it's very much like, look, we play in this massive TAM. And we know that TAM has a lot of legacy businesses. And so the narrative and the differentiation and the problem that we're solving becomes really important, meaning, hey, instead of me going to Gil and saying, hey, we can provide you with a better way to make phone calls or have video meetings across any device, what if I can help you understand what's happening within those conversations so you can make better business decisions? So I fall less in like, that's a different category. There are different problems that we solve. And then it gets into kind of the marketing and the speak and the differentiation that you want to lean into in terms of how you sell this to your customers. I agree. I think it's a really thoughtful, what you just mentioned around, do you have to go and get a new line item created for this or a new budget created for this? And the challenge with that is nobody ever knows. And this gets into the category creation is there's a bunch of like creating a category sounds great until you literally have to then go convince somebody that they should spend money on it and then also spend time educating them on what it is. And what I learned kind of managing a startup was, hey, if I can go play in an industry that has a massive TAM and then differentiate and tell a different story and truly have something that's different, I would much rather fight that battle than necessarily get into the, I want to create a whole new realm and I got to think about how to go to market on it. I got to think about educating it. I got to go convince people that there's a new budget. I think that can also be fairly challenging.
Keith?
Yeah, Dan and I are going to agree twice. So, I mean, a couple of things. I'll talk about Dialpad for a second. I'll cross over. Dialpad has the best product in a legacy market with a huge TAM. Like Dialpad doesn't need a category. Like, I mean, that category is worth $50 billion and they have the best product and the product gets better every release. I mean, that's a really winning position. when I think about categories, I think about, the first thing is always motivation. I understand if the motivation's I want to just make money. I mean, that's the motivation has to align with the customer or the audience's motivation. You know, it's why HubSpot worked, because HubSpot's motivation aligned with marketers and the whole shift to inbound marketing. I think it's why Marketo had a lot of success. Same thing, like marketers were trying to get a seat at the table, and Marketo was, you know, building something to try and get them a seat at the table. So it lined up. I think that's really the question. You know, when I was at SuccessFactors years ago, SuccessFactors, just after the IPO, pre-exit, we sold software to HR software, performance management to start goals, recruiting, et cetera, et cetera. And we had decided, but it was decided that we were going to change to business execution software. We called it BizX. It was a horrible name, but it was going to be the new category. And here's the deal. No one in HR wanted that. Like, they didn't want it to be business execution software, and no one, CEO, COO, cared, because when you just went to them, there's like, cool, this seems like HR software. Why are you not talking to my chief people officer, right? There was completely like two ships passing in the night. Company wants to create a category, audience doesn't care. So the motivations have to line up in order for it to work. With LaunchDarkly, we're in the feature management space. We created that category, and it's because we have a unique product that software teams want, and no one knew where to stick it, right? It just didn't really fall under pure DevOps. It didn't really fall under CI/CD. It felt like something else in between. And, you know, our motivations aligned with our audience's motivations, and that's how we got here. But I think that's the biggest question, because whenever your CEO comes to you and says, we need to create a category, you should be really, really skeptical and work your way backwards.
Very interesting. It's fascinating because I was just talking to Chris from Sendoso, and he was mentioning, well, two things. First, he was mentioning how they were going after category creation from day one, which I thought was fascinating, because I had no fucking clue how to create a startup in Silicon Valley, and I definitely did not know about category creation. I didn't want to do that at all. I'm more of a product person. I was a marketer. I'm an engineer. That's where it came from. But my VP of marketing, he thought, this is completely new. I've done this for like 15 years. This is completely new category. We have to do this. And I was like, no, this sounds like a really tough thing to do. He was like, I think we're going to do it anyway. I think it's a really good idea. And he was right. And we're trying to do it, which is why I'm trying to learn from you how to execute it. But the customers, both of you agree that customers telling you to do it and customers agreeing and being aligned with you, you were calling it motivation, but essentially being aligned. Like, I think Nick Mehta was talking about creating a place a place on the table for customer success. They were like a third-class citizen before, and Gainsight made it legit, like customer success.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is kind of for you the biggest factor for both of you. Like there is a customer who's thinking about the problem in a different way, and you're aligned, and you created that unique value proposition that was not there before.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to ask yourself, like, could we create like raving fans? Like, do people care that? I mean, I think Gainsight's a good example. I think Zendesk way back in the day is a great example. Like, customer support software sucked. Every party hated it. If you were in customer support, you thought I've made terrible choices and I'm using terrible software. And if you're having to deal with customer support, something's going wrong. And so it's just a transaction where every single person is miserable, right? And Zendesk came in and said they built something that was like sort of a beautiful experience, and they celebrated people in customer support. And suddenly in the 2009, 2010 space, being in support was actually pretty cool. And it was because they had motivation, right? Both parties had motivation. I want to make customer support cool, and I'm in customer support. It would be really great if it didn't suck so bad. And you line those things up, and I think good things happen. And I think Gainsight had a very similar experience.
Dan, are you in agreement?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm going silent on this stuff because I think we're in agreement on it. I'm
shocked.
I am flabbergasted.
All right, I'm going to change gears for a second because I feel like you worked together before, so I want to talk about something else for a moment there. Where did you work together? And I want to hear. Usually, I ask my guests to talk about their #fail moment for themselves. But since you both work with each other and you love each other so much, would you be able or willing to tell about the other person's hashtag fail moment when you were working together and loving it so much?
Oh man, that's a good question. This is like on the spot too. I literally.
Dan and I are both perfect, so it's really hard.
Yeah, no, I'm honestly trying to think of like a failed moment. I'll do a failed moment that combines. Like, there's probably like the two of us, because I think it gets into a little bit of like category creation. But like I was overseeing revenue and Keith was overseeing marketing, and one, like, hopefully people pick up kind of the rapport between me and Keith. Like I think Keith's awesome. I would love to work with him again. So we had a hashtag work from anywhere. And that hashtag we had prior to both me and Keith joining Dialpad.
Yeah.
We did not lean in hard enough. So this is like a failed moment of like owning, I would say like owning a category or owning some marketing around this. Fast forward a year and a half later, we now have been obviously challenged going through a pandemic, and now everyone talks about work from anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think it was a massive kind of missed opportunity for all of us to see kill the desk phone we had as a hashtag, and then this work from anywhere, we were the first ones to brand it, and now I just see it everywhere, and it irks me to be like, oh, we could have been the brand that really could have captured that moment. And that's not on the marketing people, and it's on, as I said, it's not one person's mistake or failure on that stuff. And I really think there are failures in life. There's just things that you learn from. And that's one of like, hey, if you had this good idea, sometimes you got to stick with it a little bit longer. Sometimes you got to scream it from the rooftops and lean into it. And I think that was just a moment that we missed. But as I said, like, was there like a crisis moment that we failed on, or Keith, suffered through it? Honestly, there's not one that like comes to mind.
I should have predicted the pandemic. If I would have, I missed
Where
that
were
one.
you on that?
I know. No, I think that I think my answer would be probably like, it's actually related to what Dan said, is it's just inconsistent. Like, I think like we had a habit of like a little bit of a shiny object problems at times, and when we would find something and we were like, oh, this is a thing, half the team was already looking for the next thing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then by the time half the team caught up with that half of the team, the other half of the team had already started looking at the next thing. And so it was never enough, I think, just holding on tight to something. Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, and going back to Gil, to like where like the initial part of the conversation around category creation, I do think what helped, like if you have that moment in time and you can solve that problem, what I think the best companies do is they're solving that one. They understand specifically the problem and the opportunity that's there. And I think what becomes a little bit challenging for other businesses, especially as they scale, is they start to get distracted on what actually is they get almost pulled out of their category. And so you suddenly see these startups, because they have pressure of scale, perhaps the initial category that they're building in is gonna tap out on the TAM, the total addressable market. And so they have to figure out how to innovate and drive differentiation. And so they start actually leaking in to other places. And I think, we at times, like, that has been much like any business that gets to scale, like that's been at times one of those challenges for us. It's like, hey, what's the core problem, the core category that is true to our DNA?
Distraction, shiny objects, very important. Can you tell me a little bit about competition, category creation and competition? How do you deal with that? So maybe you're doing something great. It is very unique. And suddenly there are others using similar words and talking about other things. Maybe they have the same exact features or less. What do you do with that? How do you handle competition in the path to category creation?
Again, running a company for the first time, you learn a lot of things. There's definitely things I would have done differently. And for context, so I had joined Talk IQ as the second CEO. I took us through our Series A round, and we were very much like pre-revenue. at that moment in time, I think the opportunities, there was a massive opportunity to own the conversational intelligence space. And I would say Gong and Chorus were two of our direct competitors. We had all raised similar Series A's. All of us were pretty much pre-revenue very early on in where we were. So it's kind of a 3-horse race at the time. Where I think we went wrong was actually not leaning into building a strong advisor network. And I think both Chorus and Gong, I think Gong does this exceptionally well of how do we go and partner with other sales leaders as a way to go and drive product adoption within kind of the organizations that you aspire to have as customers. And I also think they went really, really big in terms of their branding and marketing. They are kind of the loudest voice in the room on some of that stuff. And when you become the loudest voice in the room, and almost especially early stage, you almost suck the oxygen out of places, which I think can be really helpful, right? You tend to get you tend to be able to raise large rounds. That gives you more ability to go own the market, right? You suddenly can go and you can buy a market, right? You're able to afford discounting and those things, but you can go and look bigger than perhaps you are. You can show up at Dreamforce with the biggest booth. And I always tell people as the startup is like, don't show up at Dreamforce with the smallest house next to your competitor that's got a big hair house. That's just not, it's not a good look. Yep. And nobody will, if you don't show up, nobody will notice that you're not there. They will notice you if you show up and have the smallest house.
100%.
I look back to those moments of category creation, and I think there are some tremendous things that people can do around leveraging networks and advisors and leaning into that and creating ways to drive organic adoption within aspirational customers. And then also just leaning in hard to marketing. And I think it's a balance when you deal with your board, because your board at that moment in time is, hey, you're early on revenue. They want you to be really mindful of burn, especially if you don't have a lot of revenue coming in. But you also need to find ways to generate and build momentum and to kind of take shots at the competitors that are there.
You said so much right there. I wrote a few things.
He's long-winded.
It's bad. No, it's badass. You said a few things that were, I was hoping you'll get into. So thank you. That was very insightful. Keith, what do you have to add to that, if at all?
I mean, he said so much. But
yeah, no pressure. No pressure, Keith. Keith,
no,
the easy answer is just to say you agree.
I agree. I don't think I remember the question because Dan talked for so long. I want to just get back to Dan's his trade show thing. I could not agree more of like, you can lie in the digital world. You cannot lie in the physical world. The person with the biggest, checking account shows up at Dreamforce. And if you're in one of those little spaces, it looks pretty sad. I mean, you can Photoshop your Tinder photo, but eventually you're going to have to show up on the date. So totally agree with that. I mean, I think competition, honestly, I mean, everyone says this, but, no competition, no market. Your goal in the perfect scenario is to lead a category, clearly lead the category, and then get a bunch of competitors who are willing to spend marketing dollars, which basically triple and quadruple your awareness, because for every dollar you're spending, they're spending dollars as well. And you just plan on winning on every shortlist deal anyway. I mean, that's the dream. Competition can actually increase your efficiency because they're driving awareness to your category. And if they don't, then it's all on you. But your preference is to be way out in front when that starts, so that you're not really in a huge fight. Yeah. And I actually think that's, Gong's a really good example of that. I think Gong did great things. Gong, I thought they invested in brand early. They just used data as an asset, and they used it with an audience that cares. Like, sales is a great audience for this. And it was all like, here's the 5 words that we analyzed 1 million calls, and here's the 5 words that'll help you close more deals, stuff like that. And I thought the product marketing there was excellent. And, who didn't want that? And people would start sharing it. And then, salespeople were like, using Gong was a little bit of a badge of honor, I think. So they did a really good job. And then I actually think that competition just helped. They just made them bigger.
That is interesting. So competition is actually can keep you, keep you honest, keep you effective. They do the marketing for you, but actually you both agree that, if you can be the loudest speaker and set up the narrative early on and invest in it, then you get more funding, then you can do more of it. It really is interesting because it reminds me of Chris. He just said, I invested in branding awareness and category creation from day one. He didn't necessarily knew what it's going to look like, but he did a trial and error and invested the money in it.
We're also the go-to-market people, though, and I think like that's also a balance and a challenge. And when you have technical founders at times that believe truly in product-driven growth, which is, hey, if we just build the best product, people should naturally want to use it. And I think that can be a challenge early on. I see you laughing and smiling, Gil, so hopefully that resonates to some extent. But I think that can be a challenge, right? Which is you go into an early stage startup and you're like, hey, we need help to get we have to invest in go-to-market motions, which is getting salespeople and investing in marketing and brand. And that can be its own debates and argument, depending on, as I said, the makeup of that early stage team, of just where they come from in terms of their perspectives. And those are real dynamics that show up in the startup world in seed stage businesses.
It resonates on million levels, right? I am exactly that technical founder. I'm product driven. It's never the case that the best product wins. I mean, not never the case, but it's not the reason. Maybe in consumer world or maybe in some other places, but I definitely recognize that. And so it's very interesting to hear. The go-to-market lead is what makes the go-to-market, right? That's what makes your ARR triple and the NRR and people putting it synonymous with whatever the category name you're trying to do with in the customer's mind, whatever it is. So it's fascinating to hear it. I'm trying to, first of all, I should get myself another, I have to get myself another glass of this. But really, I'm trying to learn, like, what is that stage? Like, at what point do you go all in? Like, once you have product market fit, let's assume you have product market fit. You know that you created something that is superior, better product. It's different than the others. There is some proxy, right? I think I had Amitabh from WorkSpot. He said, like, there is a proxy to your category. It's better because otherwise the analysts are just like thinking you're a weird animal. It's going to take you a while.
Yeah.
Like, I had Diana from Hootsuite and Yammer. There was nothing similar. So she had to kind of get her an army of customers telling the analysts this is completely different, but you should still cover it. But many times it's not completely different. At what stage do you say, I've proven enough, both from a product perspective, customer traction, product market fit in general? I even have some go-to-market fit, repeatable process that I'm comfortable with. At what stage do you say, let's move away from the technical founder, I need to survive, to the, I'm going to go all in and make bets that might be dangerous. But if we're not mistaken, then we're going to be the number one leader in that category. Teach me, like, what is that moment so I can recognize it and then make that bet?
Ooh, good question.
I feel like that moment's just as soon as humanly possible. It's really hard to say like that. I mean, I think product market fit is probably a pretty good, indication, because if you're trying to brand build and build a category pre-product market fit, it's going to be really difficult because you're constantly going to be trying to sort of iterate your way to something that people actually want, and the next dollar is easier than the previous one. There's no like fairy that flies into the room and says you've achieved, like, there's a sound, and a ding, and you've hit product market fit. So I know it's not that, like, you don't just know it right away, but as close as possible, I think, is when you start investing in brand and or category. I think that especially in B2B, it's gotten much better, but it wasn't that long ago when people just didn't think brand mattered in B2B. And it's sort of absurd now. I think most people acknowledge that. But I think the earlier you do it, the more you build a company around it, which I think is helpful.
To add on to Keith, I don't think there's a moment in time. I mean, you can look at benchmarks and you can look at kind of expectations around growth to say, like, when should you really, if you're in the top quartile of businesses at similar stages, like, all of that is pretty open to go and see. My general take is, like, look, like, building a startup, working in startups is all a risk. I think one of the biggest risks is actually not swinging the bat. And I think people can get nervous around that. And again, it's taken me 20 years in a career to suddenly realize, like, I'm in this because I want to take swings. I don't want to get called out on strikes. And so that means that you got to have enough capital to go up against Goliaths. If you're, some of our biggest competitors are Google and Microsoft and RingCentral and Zoom. So if we're like, hey, we're trying to be really practical on spend, I can tell you how this would, yeah, you're shaking your head. I can tell you how the end game of that works out. It's not rocket science. And so then you've got to care about, the narrative, and you got to have enough funds to go and fight differently and do things and take a swing at it. Because I'm like, I can tell you what it's going to be like if we don't lean into the momentum we have and spend and try to raise capital and all of those things. I'm like, the Goliaths will bleed you out. And I think the same happens in category creation, that there's no moment in time. Generally, I think you'll feel it and see it. And I know that sounds fairly generic, but when you start seeing consistent wins and brands, and people like to pay attention to the size of brands potentially, those are the moments where I'm like, hey, if you can go raise as much money that makes sense, and then you got to think about dilution and all of that stuff, and valuation is a blessing and curse, depending on kind of what you want to go and achieve. Then I'm very much in like, hey, you're in this trying to make swings, go and take a swing, because I can tell you'll probably look back at the end of your life and say like, oh, did I take that swing or did I play it conservative? It's taken a bunch of years to go and actually have the, to go through things that we didn't go and do and wish like, oh, darn it, I wish we had done that and so forth. And you regret it. And so then it becomes like, and I say this to Craig, our CEO now all the time, which is like, let's go take swings. We're here to go take swings because we think we got a great story and a great product. Like, let's go for it.
I think Craig is very lucky to have that conversation with you, because I think that is exactly, look, there's reality and there is the future, right? And a founder has to constantly live in both. And if you're not living in the founder, there is nothing to work on. There is no revenue, there is no funding, there's no product. You might as well go home. It's like there's no future. But if you also only live in the present, then what are you living for? There is no, the biggest promise is what you're going to do in 2 years. And so I can really resonate with that. And that's exactly, it's amazing, because it really is that, I was just having this all hands with my team, and I was telling them, and I was the first one to be all about survival. Look, we have to survive. We have to figure out our unit economics. We have to do the product market fit, the NRR, the growth has to be there. And then we achieved it. It's like, awesome. We don't have to survive it. Like, we're surviving. We're good.
Yeah.
Now it's about thriving. And now it's above thriving. And now it's about being the first. I think that step is tough, especially if you are accustomed to adversity and scarcity, and you have to really remove yourself from that mindset and jump into the next, which is, I'm going to start making bets. So what does it look like in terms of execution? So you're having this conversation, you raised enough to make to take the first bet. It's not the 30, 40 million on a 40X, but you have enough to, whatever it is. What does it look like? What kind of risk would you take, the first one in your priority?
Our biggest risk then get into, you're betting on your go-to-market motions, which gets into just even added sales capacity. We added for just, I'll give you some number, like we added 147 people in my org last year alone. And we did that through a pandemic on onboarding. And trust me, like we had raised $100 million round, but that's why I take a deep breath now, because I'm like, we're gonna go do that again this year. But those are the moments where you're like, okay, I'm now betting on myself. I'm betting on our execution. I'm betting on our operational cadence. And most importantly, I'm betting on really the frontline managers. And I say this a lot with to different people, that I think that the frontline managers in an organization are really the lifeblood in an organization. I don't think they're given nearly as much credit for everything that they do, because all of the onboarding and training typically falls to them. It's not falling to, I'm far enough removed that I'm given the orders and the strategy, but like the day-to-day is there. But those bets, like at least for me, really come down to, do we have the right talent? Do we have the right motions to go and fill those butts in seats to help hit the capacity model? Because I can tell you, if we don't get the hiring model and we don't hit the ramp model, it all goes sideways. And I can tell you what happens when it goes sideways. We miss numbers, and then you lose people. And then that creates its own slippery moment in terms of, the culture goes sideways and you deal with attrition and all of that. So the bet starts with, what do we think? What do we think is the opportunity? It then get into, we've got to build a model that makes sense, and then gut checking the model to make sure that we're not being too aggressive. We want to be aggressive, but we're not in ludicrous mode, because I've seen some people with ludicrous mode. And then it comes down to like, hey, do we have the right pieces in place to actually do this at scale and do it effectively? So I think there's kind of like a number of moving pieces that get into that. And I think there can be pressure on models, right, to begin with, which is, if you are trying to raise a lot of money, there's always this growth expectation you're getting to, but at the end of the day, you've got to hit those numbers. And like the best companies, especially obviously in public markets, are the ones that are setting reasonable expectations and then consistently beating them. And I think at times founders can feel that they need to come up with a model just to hit a number in order to raise a certain amount of money. And then they get into trying to actually execute on that number and it's not reasonable. There's no way that they can get to it. So I think you got to have some sanity of leadership in there that can go and gut check that stuff.
Totally. And you were talking about evaluation being a double-edged sword. I think that, I don't know if that's the word you use, but like you get this 40x, or especially these days, right? You get like 30, 40x, 50, sometimes or even more. And then you have to graduate to that valuation. Good luck. You have a gun to your head in a particular period of time, please.
Yeah, no, sorry to interject. Keith, I'll let you talk at some point. Don't worry.
Please, I'm going to take a nap. It's fine.
Well, the valuation is a blessing of curse. Like it's great for marketing, right? It's great to go and say, hey, here's our valuation. But you also have to make sure that you're in a TAM that's big enough to support it. And what I mean by that is sometimes you can be so, you've raised such a high valuation that your only path to surviving is going public. And then being a good public company. And so I think at times, there are great businesses that can get to 100 million or can get to 50 million, and the TAM is simply not big enough to support the growth expectation. And then their valuation's so high, you're like, okay, where do you go? You're too expensive to necessarily get acquired. Perhaps you go the PE route, and those are real things that come into it too. So when I'm speaking about valuation, it's you got to understand your game plan of what's your exit strategy, and then is your TAM big enough to go and get you where you want to be.
It's fascinating. I'm in real time. I'm thinking about my company. I can't avoid it, and I think I got it wrong, because when I think about valuation and the 30, 40x multiples, I'm thinking, the moment you do that, let's say you got the 40x multiples on your ARR, what have you, now you have to graduate there. You're saying that's not a problem. You'll get there. That's the bet you have to make. That is exactly taking the bet. But it is ahead of time. You should calculate the TAM, that the immediate total addressable market, the ARR you could make. If it's 50 or 100, there's a limit there. But if it's $1 billion ARR you can make, don't think about it twice. If you think you have the best product, if you think the market is big enough to be served, then go and try that. There is no limit. Like if you do your job, of course, don't be ridiculous. The ludicrous situation we're talking about, let's assume that's not a problem with the technical founder, because they're very connected to the ground. The other problem is even more dangerous, which is not taking that to begin with. And there is no reason not to do it if the target market is big enough.
Yeah.
Inspirational. Keith, what do you have to say about it?
I am motivated.
I can tell, Keith.
So motivated. Yeah. I mean, I think the bet is on inefficiency. Are you willing to bet? Are you willing to increase your inefficiency or decrease your efficiency, however you want to look at it? Because to me, that's the ultimate bet. And this gets put into all sorts, it could be CAC payback, could be whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
Are you willing to invest those things knowing that you're going to drag that number up when you want it to go down, or down when you want it to go up, or whatever it is? Like you're making a bet that goes against what logically you would say, well, it's like, well, we're at 18, we're going to take it to 30, but our goal is 19. But you're making the bet that it works itself out, right? That's the bet. It's always a bet, especially at this stage, because the reality is that as the numbers get bigger, oftentimes the mechanics that got you there don't work. So you're having to both set bigger goals and try and fill the gap of how you're going to hit those goals with things that are unproven. But I'm kind of with Dan. I just feel like I think the balance is you want to be aggressive but not reckless. Then why not go get a job at Google? Like seriously, it pays really well. You push a pixel around every now and then, take a few days off. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like that's not a bet. But I think the key is just like trying to find the line between aggressive and reckless, and trying to really kind of lean into being inefficient. and that being okay.
You bring up a good point on that, on the inefficiency thing, because all of that right? Like your cash burn suddenly spikes, and then you've got to get, and people can be impatient on results, and usually things take a little bit longer, right? And so then it's a case of like not getting spooked immediately, right? If your cash burn suddenly doubles, like, I think it's well said, Keith.
The other thing is that I think this town gets really focused on hiring as like a success metric. You know what I mean? Like they hired 300 people last year and everybody's like, oh my God, they must be killing it, right? It's great. And then they lay off 150 people and everyone says, well, maybe not. So I think like you try to make the investments, like on the marketing side, you make investments in program spend long before you make investments in tripling the size of your team or whatever. Like you try and start making the bets that you can, maybe that bet's not going so well, I can turn it down a little bit. Whereas if I take the team from 10 to 50, well, now I've got 40 new people and, we're sitting around trying to figure what to do. So I think that sales capacity, Dan talked about this, models really can, you can make anything work in a model. So that's the beauty of it. But I think once you start really leaning into headcount, you need to kind of have some indication that this is working.
You said a bunch of things I want to go back to. So efficiencies. Dan, you said, you hired, I think 140 people, you said?
Yeah, 147.
Holy shit. That is ridiculous. You hire so many people. There is no, and you said it, Keith, like there is no chance of not making mistakes. I think, I don't know. I've been in that story with a smaller number, much smaller number, like 15 people. And it's tough, necessary, but tough to keep the bar high and make the decisions that are unpopular about the mistakes you've made. You hire too many people, not all of them were good, and now you have to fire a bunch of people. It hurts the morale, but everyone is asking what took you so long. What is the level of inefficiency that is not ludicrous, but it is opportunistic?
So I can give it from like my perspective. Like I definitely am, and I hate to say like the voice of reason, because that's not I'm the sales guy. So at the end of the day, the way I think about my job is, like, if something goes wrong, nobody blames product. I'm going to be the first person walked out the door. And this will take me on a tangent of why I wanted to run a business, first being the sales guy and blah, 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 blah. So I do know at this point, like, I think it's important, if there's any sales leaders listening to this, I do think it's important that you do not expect somebody else to be the voice of reason. You have to be the voice of reason of like, are you comfortable with the numbers? And if you are not comfortable with the numbers, at times you should fire your boss, which means you should not sign up, because I can tell you what will happen if you miss the number. You will get fired, you will get walked out the door. And I think it's really important for people to understand, like, you've got to be, as the person responsible for the training, onboarding, hiring, hitting the model, exceeding goals, you got to be comfortable with the numbers. You got to meticulously know the details of your team and the performance of that team to feel comfortable to go do this at scale. There's always things, I don't necessarily know how to answer if like, what's the reasonable bound of, I don't know if there was a metric that I looked at some of the growth rates and said like, oh, that's going to be I know when it's a stretch and where I feel comfortable. But I don't know if there was a band that kind of took me out of things. So kind of like a little bit of like a non-answer and a ramble there.
You answered. First of all, let's drink. Look at you. I have a little bit of
you already spilled
ice.
Some.
No, I didn't spill. It's just the ice. I'm not there yet. It's like it takes me at least. But please do get a drink. You did mention, Keith, I think growth efficiencies, right? You mentioned like CAC, LTV. I think some other. What is the level? Like, what is the number that you look at and you said like, don't freak out, technical CEO. It's going to be okay. And let's give it another year or another 9 months. And if we see the trajectory doesn't improve in 9 months, then let's have this conversation. But we have enough runway. Let's make this bet and wait patiently to see if the market catches up. Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to give you a non-answer to that question, but then backdoor into another answer. I mean, I think so much of that depends on the individual business. Like it depends on your net retention, it depends on like all of those things. So if you can be really efficient up front, if your if you're expanding 1.5 in the next 12 months, even better if it's the next 6 months or whatever it is. So I think there's so many factors that play into that versus just like any one number. And I think this comes down to, your average deal size, time to second dollar, like all of these things that would give you more
Let me pause you there
confidence.
because I think I can. Let's just throw some theoretical, complete out of bound numbers.
Yep.
Let's just say 60K ACV, 81 days to close your deal. Let's say 3 months into the annual contract, it doubles in size. Let's just
Yep.
use some of those completely hypothetical numbers.
Let me give you like I'm going to take Dan's answer and your question and mash them together and see what we get out of this, right? It's going to be a casserole. Like, I don't think I have like specific science on this, but I think when you look at your you take a model, you've just modeled, I'm sure, for the new year, and you're trying to decide on efficiency and this, that, and the other. I think it's like, when you look at the model, how many assumptions have to come right for you to hit the model? And I think if it's 5, you're totally screwed. Like if you're like, okay, in order to hit the model, we're going to hire 100 people. We're going to get ramped down 30%. We're going to increase deal size by 20%. We're going to reduce churn by 8%. We're going to decrease our average, time to first dollar. And we're going to decrease, like, you start piling up all of those assumptions that need to go right. And I think once you cross about 3, like, you should start getting really, really nervous about the investments there, because at some point you put so many assumptions into a model, and what you've done is you've just modeled for a business you don't even have. Like, it's like a stark contrast from your actual business. Now, that doesn't mean that you're like, we're going to work on reducing ramp, or we're going to work on increasing our spend to pipe, or we're going to working our win rates. But if every single one, like if your model doesn't have anything that's static from the year before, then I think you're totally toast.
I wrote down how many guesses versus actuals in your model. Greater than 5, you're fucked. Is that accurate?
I'm going to call that the 5. I'll go and I'll workshop it for you. But 5 seems where you should start to get a little suspicious.
And by that, you mean like things that didn't happen in the past that you're expecting to like magically happen in the future.
Yes.
So like if your ACV is growing steadily and it's your model, that's cool. If your sales cycle is growing because your ACV is growing in a particular trajectory and you can predict it, it's okay. If velocity is cool. There is one thing that is new, let's say the ramp up time. You're expecting the next 50 to ramp up faster than the first 5. That's okay. That's a risk you're willing to put in the model.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, like, right, in a perfect world, you end the year and you say, just in the simplest, hey, we put $1 in, we get 5 out. And so now I'm going to put 10x the dollars in. Nothing else has to change. We just need to hire sales capacity. We need to do whatever. And like, we're just growing. The investment is linear. It makes perfect sense. It rarely happens that way. That is the dream, right? But instead you start saying like, okay, well, we've got to deviate somewhat from the business that we just that company that just ended the year. And we've got to start making some changes, right? And I mean, that's very natural. Like, there are things that you're like, that's not good enough, needs to be better, et cetera, et cetera. All I'm saying is just once you get too many of those and you start running your business, and suddenly you're just running a different business than the one you just ran. And that is where I think things fall apart. This is the Craig at Dialpad used to always talk about the triple double, which is the classic VC thing. First triple, like, in the grand scheme of things, seems impossible. Probably not that hard. Second triple, you're like, all right, this got pretty challenging. The double, like, once you're at like, you're trying to double from 30 to 60 or whatever it is, well, suddenly, you need to do as much revenue in 1 year that you've done in the history of the company. That's when it gets really challenging. And that's when, if you're not careful, you're the victim of model porn, which is when someone's just hidden a bunch of assumptions and you've now got a business that needs to create $30 million, and it's not a business you've run previously.
I'm gonna call this episode, I think, the like hidden gems or hidden truths for technical founder, because I learned, I think, more in this one than and many others, because you represent the complementary person next to me driving the business. The conservative founder or the technical founder, I think usually those are the same because it's an engineer in the back end. They know how to fix for those. They know how to make sure that triple, double happens. In fact, they are so, they'll reverse engineer the shit out of the numbers to make sure it happens.
Yep.
But the other part that not even, like when do you take the moment to actually go all in is the Achilles heel. That becomes the Achilles heel of that person. Usually that company gets acquired because of that exact reason, because they have the best technology and superior product, but they raised like 5% of what the other market competitors did. And so I think it's fascinating. There's a lot of lessons learned for the technical founders. I want to ask you about 100 more questions, but I'll stop here because the hour ended. I want to ask you one advice, because you gave so many already very, very important insights for technical founders and for technical CEOs. One piece of advice for a founder who finished their Series A, achieved product market fit, and is thinking, how do I move from 5 to 15 and then to 30 and to 60? Granted that they think they can, what's the first, who do they hire, or what's the next thing that they should do? One piece of advice that is the most important for that person.
I mean, I think I have a lot of advice, but one thing I would say that that really just stuck out in my head is that you have to invest in formal strategy early. It's something that I think that people don't do. Like, someone has to own the strategy. Like, the strategy has to live somewhere so that people can see it. Like our go-to-market strategy, how we think about the world. Like, what happens is that, like, you don't hire necessarily like a head of strategy at a Series A, but the reality is that like it's just kind of happening, and you just sort of grow. And then at some point in the future, you're like, oh, like people say like, what's our strategy? And you're like, well, I mean, it's the thing we're doing, which isn't really an answer, And so I just think that the sooner that you can formalize strategy in the business, it actually helps scale. It helps you gut check a lot of decisions that are getting made on whiteboards, and then suddenly they're off into the world, versus like, does this really match with how we think about the world, how we think about the market? Like, really formalize that. Because what happens is that I've just seen it many times where you wake up Series C, Series D, things have been really well, and then things taper. Like you're like, we're killing it, and then it's like, oh, so that next dollar was just a tiny bit harder than we were expecting. And there's a lot of SaaS companies that died in the graveyard at like 90 million that were racing to 90 and just fell and tumbled over 100, right? Like, their growth rate just completely went in the tank. And I think a lot of times it's because they just, it was too late. They didn't have really a sense of what their strategy was for growing that. They just had a lot of details. Like, they were too focused on executing and not focused enough on the plan.
Dan.
I'll take us on a little ramble too to close this out. So Marky Andreessen sits on our board, and it's super interesting to have him to meet with him. There was a moment in time, and he said, "Look, like the truth is in the growth rate of the business," and it was incredibly profound. And as I said, sometimes the advice that you get isn't, it's not rocket science. And I would say, like, for this is like understanding like where are you distracted, and how do you limit the distractions and really focus and lean into where you see acceleration. So that was something that I think is like general advice, which is don't try to do too much, and then also pay attention to your growth rates. And you always want to have one product or a product line, whatever it might be, that is breaking out and demonstrating accelerating growth. And I think that might mean that you have to make hard decisions to drive focus. Might means that you're going to back out of an area that's slower growing to go and lean into something that's faster growing. And again, that means that you have to be willing to take that risk and be willing to step into it and bet it all. And to Keith's point, I would reiterate, really having a plan for the future and having somebody spending their time thinking about what the next version of your product is, or if you were to start your business today, would your business and product actually look the way that you have built it? It takes on average, 10 years for a startup to get to an exit now. You pick up 10 years of Frankenstein code and things pieced together. And I can tell you, people constantly just add things on top of it, where you would probably, if you were to start your business today, you would probably do it very differently and it would look different. And I think it's important to actually force the leadership team or the executive team to actually talk about those things, to say, do we need to continue on this path that we're at, or do we need to think about potentially kind of shifting gears and doing things slightly differently? And again, it just comes back to reiterating Keith's point, which is like, you got to really think about strategies of word, and it can just float out there. But I think you actually have to have a meaningful vision of the future and the competitive landscape.
Yeah, I view it as it's the skeptic in a room full of believers. I kind of think you need it. You need that one thing that's really asking the hard question. The earlier you can sort of really formalize that, who is our audience? What do they look like? What is unique about them? How does our product align to that? Where can we grow? Can we raise our prices? Like, do we have any idea? Would they stay with us if we raise prices? Where's the adjacent market? Is there an adjacent market? How do we grow this thing? Is it through expansion? Is it through adding more SKUs? Or is it just like we have a big enough market of first-time buyers? Like, I think the more like those things just kind of happen and then they disappear. They're like in people's heads. And I actually think it just helps you hire people better as well. Like, I can't tell you how many times people will be like, walk me through the plan. And I'm like, and then what happens is you're like, the plan is the goal. You're like, our plan is $100 million. And they're like, that's a goal. It's not a plan. Right. And that's what happens is like, I think the earlier you can have a plan, because you'll have goals the whole way. Right. We're going to have here's our goal. Here's our goal. Here's our goal for product. Here's our goal for sales. Here's our goal. But like a goal and a plan are two separate things. And I think like a lot of times you're just hauling ass and you like everyone's focused on the goal. No one's focused on the plan.
This was extremely insightful for me. I can't stress this enough. So thank you both for being very candid, hilarious, a lot to learn. And I'm really excited to implement some of the things I already learned. So big thank you again. And have a wonderful rest of the week. Good weekend.
Yep.
All right.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you, Dan.
Good
Thank
to
you,
see you,
Keith.
buddy.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks again for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion and will tune in again. Find all of the B2B Category Creators episodes at Metadata.io. And if you have any feedback, topics, or would like to be a guest on the show, please reach out.